thank you so much for coming to the New York City book launch of my book. I say to you, this must be the place. Music can make your city better. If you haven't picked up a copy, there are copies in the front, as well as copies here. If you bought one and you want me to sign it after, I'll happily sign it. You can see too. So the way that I've been doing this, this is day 14 of 30 for me, my book tour around the world. Everyone is, I start with a short kind of talk or interview or presentation about a book, and then we have a discussion about the city and the not. So we're going to start, a friend of mine who's actually been instrumental in making this book happen from the beginning, Montana, Agte-Studier, is going to come and interview me. And then we're going to have a discussion with a couple interesting people from New York City. And that hopefully you guys can engage, if have questions, have comments, keep it really informal. But just obviously to thank you for me, we got to say that be able so. Please, great.
Hi, Shain. Hi, how's it going? My name is Montana, the city, and the co-founder. So we started talking a couple of years ago when this book was being written, and now it is fully fleshed out. It is a first baby, and we're so excited to be here and hold in my hand. So I guess we can start with the big question. This must be the place. The place is a music city. What is a music city?
Well, to me, every city is a music city, theoretically, because if there's people, there's music. So it doesn't need to be a city. It can be a place. It can be a village. But from the purpose of the book, and in the way I thought, is a city that incorporates music deliberately, intentionally into other policies and into how it considers economic development, how it considers tourism, how it considers social development, and to kind of tell the story backwards. For those who know me, I'm a bit of a nerd, and I am, and I'm kind of obsessed with why things are the way they are. So when I'm walking in the city, especially New York, every decision that every building, every road, every street corner, every decision that was made at some point by someone. Even if it wasn't made intentionally or it was a mistake or whatever, it was always made by something or someone. And working in the music industry all my life, doing a bunch of different things, I've kind of realized, especially when it comes to cities, that music tends to be the recipient of decisions that are made, but it doesn't have a seat at the table when those decisions are made, in general. I'm not talking about New York here, granted. And that's why, why is this venue here and the apartment building next door? And then people complain when they move in. And I always find that music tends to be something that's governed by other things. And I write in the book, if there isn't a policy on something, then it doesn't exist. You need to create a policy so you can have a conversation about what would be best for that thing, how to invest in that thing, how to manage that thing, how to govern that thing. So when a city does not have a music policy, music is governed by environmental health, or it's governed by planning, or it's governed by tourism, or the whims of someone in leadership, or something else. But music, because it is one of the things that is kind of ubiquitous around all of us, right? Music is something that, we all share. It's our universal language. It's the language that we first learned to speak. And I think it's one of those things that we don't need to live, but we would all struggle to live with that. So a music city is a city that kind of works its way back. So if music had a seat at the table of a wider strategic planning framework, so how are we investing in attracting and retaining people? How are we investing in tourism or the message that we want to give? How are we investing in community development, racial justice, the environment, all the issues that we're all facing. Music, I don't think, is the solution to anything other than I want to listen to music. So I'll put some music on. But to me, it's part of a solution to everything.
And in the book, we call it the passive policy problems with music. This issue with not actually having a policy for music, but just if you're involved somehow in the different policies.
Well, I liken it to, and for those who've heard me speak before, I apologize. You've heard this analogy. I think, Anna, you've heard this before. But it's exactly the same thing as drinking a glass of water. So when we turn the tap on and we drink a glass of water, we unintentionally do not realize all the infrastructure that went into making that moment happen. Water just doesn't come out of the tap. It requires all the pipes and filtration and desalination and distribution and so on. I know there's a couple of real estate developers there who get it, but there so much goes into that moment happening that all we are immersed in is we turn on the tap, we drink the water, and we're in that moment. And clean water, as I said, is only important when you don't have it. I think the exact same thing happens in most of our brains when we're immersed in a song or we're at a gig. Is when we, first off, we press play on our computer and any song that we've ever wanted to listen to is available to us. The ubiquity of music. And second, when we're immersed in that song, we're not realizing everything that went into making that moment happen. You know, it had to be recorded, it had to be produced, it had to be engineered, instruments had to be manufactured. People need to learn how to play those instruments, write the songs. There's an entire ecosystem from record labels to publishers to agents that are getting the music to us in one way or another. Let alone when you're at a gig, there's 20 or 30 jobs that are happening at that time that are facilitated by the song, by the artist. That wouldn't have happened if an artist is on stage. Security, marketing, bartending, logistics, other forms of hospitality, legal, accounting, law, so on. And so for me, if we reverse engineer the supply chain of music, and we recognize the incredible power it has on all of us. Not everyone can work in the music industry, I get that. But most people are touched by the music industry in one way or another. So if we can think about why this actually matters, then we can build a deliberate and intentional policy in our communities, and it's different in every community, that takes an active approach to understanding music, takes an intentional approach to understanding music. And this is all about building a data and evidence base around it. So a city that can have a successful music policy that actually matters is a city that understands, that has a data and evidence base around where is everything? How does it all fit together? How much is it worth? How much is it worth socially as well to the community? And where are the pressure points or the push points or the challenges, whether they're land use challenges, whether they're affordability challenges, whether it's a cultural thing, whatever it is. If not, then we end up making what I kind of call policy-based evidence making rather than evidence-based policy making. And I think music is too important to just deal with it in an emotional way. I think we need to deal with it in an evidence-based way. And that's kind of what drove me to the work I do and why I wrote the book, or at least I think I did. I kind of forget now. I've even heard anything after all this time.
Yeah, you can't remember it now. You touched upon, if a music ecosystem in a city is thriving, then the city is thriving, and that music ecosystem being so important.
Not always, but yeah.
To the city, true. But it helps. So that's something that you touched upon a few times, and things that you can take to the cities that you're interested in helping. It's saying, here's, like you just said, here's some jobs that happen because of this one gig. Imagine if there were 20 gigs every night. Imagine if there were 50. So sorry, you can keep going, but I just wanted to add that into what you were saying.
Well, again, like if it's something that is ubiquitous, everything that's ubiquitous, we unintentionally take credit. It is clean air, or our version of clean air. Again, water. Like, there are certain things that we all share. Access to food. It's some kind of access to healthcare, if we have access to it. And I find that music as an industry is one thing. It's incredibly important. I think it's an industry that is exciting. It's an industry that's growing. It's an industry that I'm proud to be a part of. But the music ecosystem is more than that. Is music in our healthcare system, music, just the external value of music in communities, the ability for someone to express themselves musically should they want to. As that's not something that is universal. None of this stuff is universal, unfortunately, globally. So it's my hope is that by kind of unearthing the mostly economic value of music, because that tends to be how people do stuff, but unearthing the economic value and trying to reassert the social value. It's, for example, my grandfather had Alzheimer's all my life. He died when I was 9. The only thing I remember communicating with him on was singing My Way Together by Frank Sinatra, because he had no idea who I was. He looked at my face. I wasn't his grandkid because he was too far gone, but we could sing together. And that moment, or the impact that, and I write about this, I write a chapter on COVID. COVID is this it's in the worst possible way, an incredible use case about why music matters. And I find, that if we think about it differently, if we truly believe that it's that important to us, important to our mental health, or important to our well-being, or important to our how we treat people as they age, then we have to understand that it's not ubiquitous. It's not a natural resource. Music can go away. But the problem is that if there was no more music ever written today, if today all the music stopped, and there was no more music ever written from today, we would still have music. We would still have everything from yesterday on. So it's hard to take something that we treat as ubiquitous serious. The climate emergency, I think, being another one. So this book is me, it's stories and lessons and ways that I have screwed up, and as my partner always says, you're really good at failing upwards. Seems to be my success. But it's everything, a bunch of different things that have happened to me, from being the music advisor to the mayor of London. I was lucky enough to do a little bit of work here with amazing people, to some work that I did in Australia, to work in Huntsville, Alabama, of all places. Kind of telling the story of how music has been incorporated into a community in different ways, to try to solve problems that aren't solely related to music, right?
And when you were writing this, I remember one of the biggest issues was trying to say, this needs to get out now. This is really important. I need to find a publisher that will publish this right now. So why now? Why today? And why music? Why is this so important to do?
Still took 2 years. Because I got the book deal after getting hundreds of rejections. You were there with me, pretty much no one gave a shit about me, which is fine. I don't expect anyone to give a shit about me. And then when I got the deal, which I'm incredibly thankful for, then I had to completely rewrite the book, because my editor was like, this isn't very good. So you have to rewrite it. Because I think that, I think that the music industry, the value of music is growing globally every year, which is fantastic. I think that's going to continue. We're all listening to more music now than we've ever listened to. Also, we're listening to more kind of local music, especially in other languages. I think now, and if anyone in this audience will correct me, but between 1987 and 2012, there were 3 Billboard #1 hits that weren't sung in English. La Bamba, Macarena, and that's half in English, and Gangnam Style. This year, there's been 6 non-English, maybe top 10 are #1s. 6. I think a lot of J Balvin and Bad Bunny and that stuff. But that shows that more people are, to me, more people are expressing themselves in the language that they're most comfortable in. And that more of us are listening to it, wherever we are. this kind of globalization of music. So the fact the music industry is an economic opportunity now more than it ever has been is one reason. Two is that music is not treated as an economy in a lot of parts of the world. I think we're incredibly lucky in North America and in other parts where we have copyright infrastructure, we have companies that are investing in music, we have systems that people respect when it comes to music. In a lot of parts of the world, simply being a musician is not a job. A lot of places that I've worked, and I'm working to try to change that. I think that by demonstrating the holistic social kind of ecosystem role that music can have in a community, that it's a tool to fight poverty, that it's a tool to fight the climate emergency, and not the tool, a tool, I think adds more kind of salience to the topic. And lastly, because I'm getting old, and and I feel that if we don't assert the value of music now and incorporate it into the set of strategies that we need to take to solve especially now after this weekend, solve some of the biggest challenges that we have in the world, whether it's conflict, cultural conflict, or the climate, or a mixture of the two. Music has to be incorporated into that, or it will be deprioritized by the sheer nature of the challenges that we have.
Yeah, and you were talking about how we're all listening to way more music now than ever, but if we all just listen to music by ourselves, that's not gonna help our cities too much. Can you talk a little bit about that juxtaposition of how music is so integral to all of our lives, but sometimes it's just left out of city policy?
Yeah, well, again, I have this theory about how the live music industry is doing, right? So the live music industry is doing really well, but most of the growth is in the top end, right? Rather than grassroots music venues or independent venues, smaller venues that are struggling. I get that, and that has to be addressed. I think one of the reasons is purely down to COVID and down to the trauma that we all faced, and that we now are all looking to congregate in a safe way, and we're congregating in a way that makes us where we seek familiarity. And when you're seeking familiarity, something you know, that makes you comfortable, you will listen to an artist you already know, rather than take a punt on the new artist. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are buying tickets to gigs they know. I'm sure we've all done it. We've all bought tickets to bigger events that we know, and we're excited to see them coming out of COVID. Also, outdoor shows are seen as safer than indoor shows, right? So, but I think that cities and communities have to take music seriously as a way to fight and address misinformation, and to really highlight that diversity is a good thing, and diversity is the thing that brings us together. And music is a great tool to do that, from little community festivals straight through to highlighting and celebrating the big gigs that we have. And cities that are investing in music need to do it in a way that celebrates all genres and all disciplines as much as possible. New York obviously is a different story, being one of the biggest cities in the world, but every community can do this. And a lot of communities' music strategy in small towns and cities is one festival or a venue. And to me, that needs to be expanded and explored.
Yeah, so say here the average Josephine, trying to go to gigs, trying to help the ecosystem of your own city, but is there more that each of us can do besides just going to gigs? Is there more that we can do if we're not hard up this in council?
Vote, local elections. I live in the UK where no one votes in local elections, and and a lot of our local councillors are not. I've never set foot in a nightclub. And if you've never been to somewhere, then you treat it with suspicion. We don't see a nightclub, for example. To me, a nightclub is the same thing as a community center. It's the same thing as an incubator. It's the same thing as an accelerator hub. It's the same. It's just it just caters in a different way, for example. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, to recognize that your music is not the music, right? Music is one of these things, I write about it, that we all have a personal relationship with. When I say the word music, it means something completely different to each and every one of you. But again, that is not a way to see a city's music ecosystem. City's music ecosystem means to be inclusive of your view of music, of recognizing that other people are consuming and experiencing music in different ways. And we found that a lot of, that's why a lot of direct funding goes to some genres historically. But I'm hoping that the book is a way to explain music in a slightly different way than usual, and show that, music is it's the closest thing to magic that we're ever going to come to. It is, it's something that we need to build in rather than bolt on to our cities, which New York does. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But it's also something that we can't take for granted because it can go.
In your ideal situation, where are we at in 5 to 10 years?
After this weekend, I think we're in a really interesting place for music. I think that there's more genres than there've ever been. I think there's
And non-genres.
And non-genres. There's so much more self-expression through music than there's ever been. And the fact that anything that we would ever want is available to us at any time is a good thing. Saying that, where I think we need to think about is we need to understand that the human beings that are responsible for music are recognized and remunerated, and their work is attributed. So I think that as we grow, we're going to see a lot more AI-generated music, which is fine. But to me, if we break music down into what it really is, it is a human self-expression. So if we value human self-expression, then we need to make sure that whatever comes of it, whether it's commercialized or not, is attributed to the human being or beings who made that. And that if we can't lose the fact that access to music is predicated on the fact that human beings are making music. And we have to recognize that human beings need space, human beings need time, because the most important thing I've learned in music is you need time to fail, because the process of creating a song is failing upwards. You start with an idea that may suck, and you work your way up to this fantastic piece of music that is a combination of bits of failure and bits of success, to the time, the space to do. And if we just think of music in a purely, for lack of a better word, commodified way, as I'm very commercial about music, but we have to commercialize it and continue to commercialize it with the recognition that this is based on human beings that live in places that have a emotional and personal relationship with those places, and those places benefit from them being happy, and they benefit from the place. And if we break it down into those component parts, then we can build policies and practices in our communities that respect music, respect musicians, writers, composers, but also make sure that music continues to be available to everybody who wants to access it in as accessible and inexpensive a way as possible. But looking at the time, on that note,
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for listening to me. And I thought we can move right along. If anyone wants a drink, there's a big sign that says bar. There is a functioning bar. Apparently their martinis are fantastic. And I thought we would, I'm going to shift over here and invite our panelists. If you haven't bought the book again, they are for sale over there. They make great Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, Christmas, Eid, and Diwali presents. So we should have 3 mics.
One was broken, remember?
One was broken. Okay, you're gonna have to share. So I want to shift the focus now I'm going to have you guys hopefully chime in, everyone chime in. This portion of the day is not about the book or about me, it's about you guys and about New York. And I preface this again by saying I love this city to death. I have spent quite a lot of time in it, but I do not live in it. I live in London, different issues. So I just love each of you to introduce yourselves first, what you do, and then I'm going to ask each of you three wonderful people some questions. So maybe Shira, we'll start with you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shira Gans from the New York City Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. And I'm the person who creates all the partnerships and programs for the city that support the music industry. And yeah, that's what I do.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Bond. I'm the head of planning initiatives, secretly distribution, a little music company based in New York. I have lived here for 20 years. I've been in the music industry for 20 years, always in the independent sector, and I do not have a community statement. Good.
My name is Moose. I'm a managing partner at Marauder, a New York City-based music marketing firm, and so now me and Emeritus, the director of the Venue Association, and I line and shape it.
Oh no. I thought you lived in New York City.
Because it's really expensive for people in the creative industry for New York City.
All right, we're gonna get to the negatives later. So let's start with the positives. All right, I'm gonna start with you, Shira. So this is a very different conversation in New York because New York is massive and complicated. Versus my last one was in Hamilton, Ontario, which they have their challenges too, but slightly less to talk about. Also, Pulp Town, so you know. But you know, I always refer to you as, you know, the head of music or music lead for the mayor's office. How do you choose your priorities? Is my question. Is in a city like this, where do you think you have the most impact, and why do you then kind of do what you do? Like run me through how you decide what those priorities are. Not just politically, but, you know, structurally.
Sure. So, you know, I think for me, I'm the only person in the city of New York who does this work. And prior to me starting to do it in 2016, there was no person in New York City government whose job it was to support the industry. So, you know, I think it's really thinking about, one, what are the tools in your toolbox? So what can I do in this particular office as one person with a particular budget that I have? And so I like to kind of think about Venn diagrams. Well, what are the areas that are going to affect the music industry? What are the areas that are going to affect citizens? And then what's going to be interesting to people in city government as well as the press? And so the things that live in the middle of those things are the things that you're most likely to be able to succeed. So I kind of started by thinking of different verticals. Well, I mean, we start with listening sessions to hear from folks. So there's a lot of concern about education. So what can we do to create opportunities for students in schools to learn about the industry and also to have greater opportunities to learn about music? What can we do to make people feel that the city actually cares about music? I definitely heard people who remember Giuliani telling the Grammys to go fuck themselves. I heard about that a lot. And then to LA. So, you know, there was a sense that the city really cared about film and television, but didn't care about music. So how can you do that? How can you be a convener of folks? From my experience of the industry, someone coming to it from the outside, is that it's very siloed. So how do you bring people across the value chain together? And then how do you create opportunities that I think of as generative? So when you have limited resources, how can you create a project that allows folks to plug into it, be it either folks from the private sector, from companies who do want to give back and get involved? How can you create connections that are generative? So you create a project, and then I think of it as sort of stone soup, you know? You do this sort of bare bones thing, then people get excited about it. Do people even know the stone soup drill? It's like a Jewish... Okay. The idea is a guy comes to a Jewish village and says, oh, I can make soup from a stone. Then people get really excited. It's like, oh, I have an onion I can help, and I have a carrot, and I have like some chicken bones, and you know. Anyway, I'm not up in the soup.
And you get soup.
Yeah, you get soup. Yeah, and as we go, I can talk about the projects later on, but I think, it's sort of understanding where you're going to get resources and excitement and how are you going to build this infrastructure that other folks come in and support.
So Anna, you can all hear me, right? All right. Help. You can also do that. So working in the independent sector in New York for 20 years, what are the benefits? Why, I know affordability is an issue here. Then affordability was the main issue in Kitchener, Ontario that they were saying. So, God, they don't know what they're, but what are the main benefits here? And also, what would you, as an independent label, seek from the city? Like, what would you want Shira, theoretical Shira, not literal Shira, to be considering to help support the music economy here and music ecosystem here from your perspective?
Yeah, so, I've worked for a number of independent labels managed by companies, publishers, the gamut. And, I came to New York from Portland, Oregon when Portland was cheap. The most rent I ever paid there was $300 a month for sharing an 1,100 square foot apartment with a backyard. And
The 80s?
it was in the late 90s and early 2000s. Thank you, sir. That was a city with a music scene that went to a certain extent and then kind of stopped. And I always wanted to live in New York. I'm from a very small town in California. And there's just so many people here. I know that's a silly way to put it, but when you're around so many people having so many experiences, doing so many different things creatively, you have the opportunity to, I just randomly started interning at a record label and then it was my life. Those opportunities to kind of have those serendipitous experiences where you're a musician, you meet another musician, and suddenly you're collaborating. Like, that is something that happens so often here that it's almost actually easy to take it for granted because, it's like, all your friends who move upstate and are like, I can't get any good takeout. Like, it's those things about living in this city that are just part and parcel of having such a huge and kind of diverse group of people everywhere. And there are always people with ideas, starting a venue in their house or, even if it lasts for 6 months, it's because it's illegal and dangerous. Nobody should do that. But, and it's like that idea that person has creates opportunities for other people, whether they're from in town or out of town, to meet each other. And it's just, it's all these kind of continual circles intersecting that is just something that isn't in a city where people aren't out doing stuff all the time, where you just don't have that experience.
So what do you think from that?
Yeah.
This is such a different talk in New York than other cities, but from a city perspective, thinking about music, what do you think is most important for the city to be engaging with to support the music economy?
It's tough because in terms of musicians, obviously,
Other than rent control.
right, people need space to live. I do think that the independent sector in New York and in the entire U.S. has become a lot more professionalized than it was even 15 years ago. And I think that having this city, obviously we have a city department of music, which is very important. But having the city kind of recognize those independent companies as they grow and, whatever kind of tax, real estate, stuff that I don't know about because I work in the music industry, but really supporting the independent businesses that are maybe 10 people now, but the company I work for has 50 employees in New York and had one 10 years ago. And, multiply that by however many, and you actually get a lot of people who are contributing to the economy and who are having an impact, and that's real job creation. And so looking at not only the top scale music businesses, but also finding those kind of, growing concerns and see how they can be supported, economically and in terms of, opportunities to speak to the sheer answers of the world, of which there's one.
One and only.
I don't know, wait.
So Moose, yeah, obviously as the co-founder of NEVA, I always think NEVA wasn't birthed in New York, so to speak, but it certainly was influenced quite heavily by the circumstances that New York men were facing. And my question, first off, can you take the honest through like how that evolved and how you think things have been developing for independent venues in New York now, and where do you think things are going in terms of how the city supports independent venues and the development of independent venues as part of New York's kind of core music economy and ecosystem?
First question.
I'll ask you a PR question.
So the first question of how it evolved, there are probably several hundred versions of how email was created. So I'll give you mine, which is my company brought independent venues to the U.S. And over several years, we created a national network of independent venues and promoters. And before the venues were shut down, we had started getting regular hall calls, and it was out of that Evil's birth, which is why it started so quickly. And from a slightly biased opinion, it was the lack of political investment that made it easier for other people to be able to say, hey, we can join these calls, and they're not trying to get anything out of us. It's move our rates the free. The rest of your questions, as far as how can the city support, or what can the city do?
Yeah, so now that NEVA obviously is a growing concern, a going concern, and growing concern, how do you think a city like New York, which is really at the coal face of this,
How does it?
where are we now?
I don't know what we do. I say part of the birth of NEVA on a local level was, as we were organizing nationally, and we started organizing locally, NYC, New York Venue Association, was inheriting to the success, and I'm not necessarily saying financial, I mean really the communal success of the New York State and New York City-based venues. And they were able to come together in a way that had never existed before. And many of them knew each other or knew of each other, but this was a true, lock arms. And that organization still exists. So that is a huge asset when you're talking about things like political capital and talking with a mayor's office. It's not one person saying, I need this. It's an organization saying, we need this. And that does carry weight from just an advocacy perspective. It's not just the squeaky wheel, it is the squeaky wheels that are all rattling your doors. You know what they can do together. And I think people from the Save Our Stadiums campaign are more aware of the reach, the social reach, the voter reach that people have. I mean, Shira was the champion on the entire East Coast, right? And also, of course, the minority leader at the time. And so all of these things were very New York-based. Broadway, which came on board and helped, pass Save Our Stadiums. All these things were very sure. I think that what I'd love to be able to see from the city, aside from making it easier for young entrepreneurs, which that's what they are, who are starting up their own spaces, to do so in a legal and compliant and safe way, is I would love to be able to see there be more accessibility to the tools and the funding programs that allow the spirit of entrepreneurship to be able to develop. The reason that there are so few, I won't say none, but anyone in this world will know that there's so few garage bands in New York, it's because there's no fucking garages, right? It is a bunch of solo practitioners or friends with a kit or whatever it is if you're going to be able to write music. And I think if you're just four friends partnering out after school in somebody's basement, that's a bit different than three friends smoking up in somebody's one-bedroom apartment with a guitar recorder and, a synthesizer. And it's different from a cultural perspective. From a live perspective, we all see these empty storefronts. We all see these empty spaces. That is not just a result of COVID. I don't know the numbers, but there are so many more than there were pre-COVID. Wouldn't it be great to be able to help facilitate programs that allow turning those into functional, local, economic drivers, regenerative programs that we're talking about? Well, I don't know a single restaurant here in Terminal 5, but I know that's the only reason I ever go to that part of town, unless they're going to put me on CBS or something, which they don't. but it's like there's nothing in that area that's of interest to me, except Terminal 5. Well, why don't we put other venues in the area, right? Like Lower East Side was not a destination, right? The East Village was not a destination. Like that's where you go to see shows. That's why people go to Williamsburg, was because North 6 was there, and then all these other venues started popping up, and then somebody put a bowling alley there, and all of these things that pull people in. So why can't we do that on 14th Street, right? Why can't we do that on 8th Avenue? Like there's plenty of spaces that are literally vacant that used to be at TJ Maxx or whatever it is, or even at a Chinese food restaurant that would easily house anything from 75 cap to 2,000 cap rooms.
No, and then I
just wanted to.
I have a good question for you, Shira.
I would also love it if people who ran long-time venues that have been around for decades didn't have to worry about the condos going up next door and being shut down because of noise complaints. It feels like there has to be some sort of kind of development consideration when it comes to these cultural organizations that are music-oriented, and so therefore are going to be noisy.
I agree with you, but I would say that's the second problem.
Yeah. Sorry. No. So this is a good question. Again, because this is something that we struggled with in London at the beginning. Well, we still struggle with, and I've struggled with in lots of other communities, is how to engage with other city departments and or other partners like NYC or someone like that to explain to them the value of music and to explain to them why music matters. You can kind of, go through like how you, and I know you've been successful in a number of ways. Well, in terms of animating lots of spaces, creating incredible opportunities for women in music, new recording studios, and so on. And how have you gone about that? Like, and also like where, or do you feel that that's still a challenge, trying to convince whoever it is that music matters, and what are your tools, what are your tactics to do?
Sure. I think one thing that's interesting for me hearing the conversation, no offense to my panelists, which happens a lot, is that people in the industry don't really understand necessarily how government works or what we can and can't do. So I think that's just like one challenge. Kind of in the beginning of the conversation, I started like, what are the tools in our toolbox? Like, we live in a capitalist country in a city that's dominated by real estate. So I don't have the ability to turn the TJ Maxx into a venue because that's owned by a private landlord. So that's just like, that'd be cool if I could do that. Maybe I just live there. That'd be cool too. Like, I don't know, but I can't do that. So, one thing that I'm proud of that I did set up, and we have our former nightlife mayor here, is to create an office of nightlife. And I think, if it's Ariel Palace, then former nightlife mayor. But, as far as like music.
Big deal too.
It's a big deal.
That's a big deal. I promise.
Shout out to Ariel. So yeah, that was something where when I think about music policy issues, like something Eric Berman deals with here, that's not something the city deals with. But in terms of the regulatory landscape for live music, that is something the city has a huge impact on, and it was a negative impact. We were regulating music through a lens of nuisance abatement and fining them, as opposed to seeing it as an economic driver. So creating that office, bringing in someone like Ariel from the industry to rebuild trust and to work across agencies on like not sexy stuff, like how is it that community boards make it impossible to get a liquor license and a lot of other ridiculous things that most people don't understand? Because there's no reason like you should have to understand that. So I think one is figuring out, is there a regulatory challenge? And so then there's solutions. Then there's other things like I was able to get the city to put in $6 million to bring Berklee College of Music here, save Avatar Studios, which was on the market and probably going to become condos, and create a power station at Berklee NYC. Woo, that's cool. So we did $6 million. Thank you. But there was someone on the Berklee board with $21 million to put in. And that's something the city can do, right? That's like a capital stack that makes sense. But the city's not going to just put in the entire cost of that. So I think it's one, part of my priorities is just having a good sense for opportunities. Like, when is that moment of things coming together when you can do that? I think someone like EDC, Shain did a cool study for me on music hubs. I was interested in creating a music hub. That's not something I've managed to do. It was going to be a space with co-working space. We're going to have a music business accelerator. It's going to have like all this stuff. I mean, music didn't help, but also like EDC is the city's landlord. They're an economic development corporation. They manage all the city's assets and they want market rate. Yeah, the city is a business too, and it's owned today. And so, I think sometimes some of the challenges kind of shifting the mindset. If you are in an advocacy position from the music side, this happened a lot when I was working to set up the Office of Nightlife, where folks would come to me and say, oh, well, are you going to create special incentives for independent music and not like bottles and models clubs? And from the city's perspective, it's like, I don't know, like if you want to go to a bottles and models club and listen to house music or like top 40, knock yourself out. If you want to go to an independent venue, like knock yourself out. Just like buy a drink and pay a ticket and like carry on. That's not really it's not my role as a public servant to put my finger on the scales of culture, right? Like as long as you're going to spend money and support the economy, I don't really care. So, getting a little bit out of that idea that like that you don't need a business structure, and the things that they're not objective. You might have a feeling that independent music is more valuable than cover bands or house music. Not everybody agrees with that. So what is the economic and social argument that isn't just, hey, we think we're really important, can you give us a different tax code? It's like, no, sorry.
I'd like to rebut.
Great. This is what I want. I want a lively debate.
I will start by saying, and I bet that's genuine, I still do. This morning I was praising Shira publicly about how amazing she is and the work that she's done in your department. So I do want to say very publicly, I really fascinated by what you have been able to achieve, the many programs, some of which my company has participated in, etc. I will also say you're in a position where there is never going to be a win, right? Even if the many wins that you have, there's always going to be wins. There's always going to be other things. Why isn't this done? Why couldn't that be done, right? And so I think my rebuttal to this isn't something government does, or it's not something the city does, or whatever it is well maybe it could be. Right?
Well, I'm not saying the city doesn't do it, and I don't want to say it.
Maybe not the right part, right?
No, I just think that there is. I think in the way that Neva and Naiva, what you guys did was you understood that you had more leverage than you had thought. That there was an economic story to be told, and there was an emotional and cultural story to be told, and you told it very effectively.
But I think that. Municipalities, not specifically New York, but municipalities, have the access to the tools, and again, the book, have the access to the tools to be able to set structure that allows other various forms of activities to take place. If, for example, and again, I understand how real estate works to some degree, but if, for example, someone were to say the 4 blocks surrounding Union Square are all going to be walked by eminent domain, and all of a sudden we're going to have the arts and culture district. If that were to happen, boom, here's your meat ash, right? Like, it's like, we're just going to force it. We're going to create new rent models. We're going to create new infrastructure, studio work, housing, et cetera, if that's clearly never going to happen. But if the city were to get $21 million plus $6 million $9 million, was it?
Six.
Okay. And if they were to buy a TJ Maxx, right, for example, and if they were to say, this is going to be our center and we'll sublease.
Sure.
I'm just saying, like, there's practical ways that the what if could be effective.
Yeah.
None of which you just said, though, with practical.
Well, and speaking more practically on the bottles and models versus Punk Club and Bushwick issue, anyone coming through the door and spending a ticket price is valuable, but what if there was an incentive for them to be booking artists who are also local? So then that money goes to them, it goes back into the economy, and that feels less likely, more likely than like putting it TJ Maxx.
Yeah. Well, it's a city policy-wise has to be completely and utterly agnostic. If a strip club, if the people working there are properly remunerated and people are enjoying it, it's safe, great. But one thing is, and it's true, is everything moves slowly. And the fact, and I have to say, when we met, whatever, it was 10 years ago or whatever.
7. Yeah.
7? Okay, whatever. Probably before that. But there's so much has happened since. So much incredibly positive stuff has happened since. But one example that wouldn't have happened a couple of years ago that just did, this isn't in New York, but in Texas, is a rebate program in not just in Austin, in all of Texas, that essentially, if you program, I think it is 3 bands a week, and you prioritize original music, this is their decision, then you get up to $100,000 rebated off your liquor tax. It's called the Texas Music Venue Rebate Program.
Bands?
No, just any bands. Or DJs or rap, whatever. That's something that the state is doing, again, because the state controls liquor in Texas. Here too, yeah. So but that is something that would have been unheard of a few years ago. In something in Austin to support live music, one can understand that there would be a program, and there's loads of programs in Austin to support live music. One could argue that it's not enough, or there's lots of challenges there too, but they do a lot. This was a state Texas-wide policy that would have never happened before COVID. And that's the thing, is I think that there's a great opportunity in a city that anything is possible and nothing is possible to make anything possible. It's the same that we have in London. But I think that there's a real opportunity in New York now to marry, to bring together a number of different objectives at once. So New York is still and will always be the capital of the global music industry, one of them, maybe London too, maybe LA a little bit, but New York. And New York is known for music from a tourism perspective. And I always think that there's always an opportunity for agencies to communicate more with each other, right? In a way that can help support the music. So just there's the Austin model. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of and again, I love New York City. I've worked in public service my whole life and created all these programs. So I'm just playing a little bit of devil's advocate and see, just to help people think about how to be effective. So in an instance like that, like, actually eminent domain is when you take a blighted area and you use it for public use. So that kind of example, I think, though I know you're doing it in jest, is Twitter. Yeah. So it's like I've had experiences of trying to work with companies who want to come and get a deal from the city on real estate and saying, hey, we're trying to revitalize the South Bronx. We're trying to revitalize Sunset Park. And people are like, do you have anything in Soho? It's like, no, I don't, because that's like not really the job of the city to do that. So if you want to be part of like a great history of artists coming into underdeveloped neighborhoods and benefit from the city subsidizing your rent, because you're going to do that, great. But you're also going to have to schlep to the Bronx or to Sunset Park. And So I think it's some of those realistic things of saying, oh, can we leverage the arts to make this area more exciting and get it on the ground level and make it more livable or more safe, as opposed to saying, hey, can you take this TJ Maxx in Union Square with one of the highest rents per square foot and make it into a club? It's like, no, we can't. But I think that some of those ideas.
The hip hop museum is a great.
Sure, but that's not in Times Square. I mean, that's not in
That's what I mean.
Yeah, and that's something that was,
The Bronx, right?
again, that was a really great store. And that's a
You guys
great one.
literally shut the roads down on Broadway, right? Like that would have been unheard of until somebody actually
Sure,
said
that's great, and we control the roads.
She's
Well, not you, of course, but I mean, the city made a decision at some point, we're gonna stop car traffic. Well, I wanted to,
Yeah, no, I know, but I'm saying, we own the roads, and so that's something we could do, and we did open culture, so, again, during the pandemic, removing regulatory hurdles to having amplified sound, to having performance in public space. I mean, this is even a word I didn't know until Shain was like busking. Just feels like totally Canadian, and there was like
Actually, an Australian word.
I don't know. I was like, I don't know what that is. I'm like, and then in the pandemic, all of a sudden, everywhere I went, it was like you were locked down, then the protests started happening, you walked outside, and open streets had happened, and there was like plants in the streets, and then there was music everywhere. And I think the city kind of, helped to make some of that stuff more normalized and not fine people. So I think it's thinking about what are those partnerships and how can you fit music into something. So, there's a big Kingsbridge Armory, which is like a little bit like a haunted site in the Bronx that many economic development projects have been tried, and they always collapse, So now there's a big focus on arts and culture and TV and film. I'd love to see as people respond to that proposal from the city of people adding in music, And that's like something,
I think that's
for example, Liz, I'd love to talk to you about, and thinking about how to make some of those connections and building those kinds of bridges, because that is an opportunity and that's something that's there, and folks are open to that.
Well, I think the word connections is really crucial because I do think, the larger companies that have, and sorry to be like to the lip, like I told you I was, the larger companies that have like the people on the ground who are doing their kind of real estate evaluation and looking at their offices and all their tax opportunities. How we have someone who researches that. But in terms of, the smaller companies, even the big small companies, management companies, hundreds of employees, like being able to understand the implications of, if we move our office here, if we open a studio here, if we're able to, kind of localize this in those neighborhoods that, people already live in and have the opportunities available, those are the kinds of conversations that people would really be into. And then, all of their employees who don't live in Sunset Park would grumble about having to commute, but they do that anyways. So it's all good. But yeah, I think that's really, really interesting. And I think there could be a real opportunity for partnership, not just kind of like this is available, but how could this work, in a realistic way?
I think, again, the music, all of us in the music industry have to learn more about what is and isn't possible, but also but still, if it isn't possible now, it doesn't mean that it's impossible. So that's something I've learned is you can make shit happen. You just have to be a pain in the ends. Which is, well, I'm really good at that. It's it's either the brag and nag mentality. This is going to be great over and over and over again, or the shaming of it.
Shain, can I just say, first of all, let me also make a public correction.
And then I want to open it up to some.
I was completely incorrect to say that you've never had wins, because I'll tell you, I've had wins from the many, many wins that you've had. And I will also take this opportunity to shout out the youth program that you have done. It is a massive, amazing success for New York City. And it sure deserves credit for that.
Thank you.
I will also say, I think, Shain, what you just said was where I was coming from with that point, because I realized that there are realistic and pragmatic obstacles to doing basically everything I said.
Also, if you can make something happen here, I've learned,
Right.
you pretty much make it
You
happen.
need to be here to find out. But I will say, I do think these conversations start somewhere. So if a mega billionaire developer comes in and says, hey, we're taking over the old TJ Maxx and Union Square, whatever it is, perhaps one of the rebates that the city could say is, we want public use of this space, or whatever the case might be. And that could be an incentive that comes from the idea of how does the city get more real estate for use.
I mean, I guess I'll say just like two things. One, just to highlight some of the things we have done, talk about the wins. As an example, I think of how things do work. Someone who, your former boss, Justin Kalifowitz, who owns Downtown Music, came to me and it was a real advocate for New York City and said, hey, there's so much stuff the industry does during June. Like, isn't there a way for the city to acknowledge that? And I was like, yeah, let's make June New York Music Month. And that started in 2017, and it started with a conference that Shain helped us do the first time, and a few things. And this year, we had a huge conference that was at capacity. We had over 60 events in June. We underwrote rehearsal space for musicians across the 5 boroughs. We did 8 concerts at underserved parks and underserved communities in the Bronx and Queens. And, it was like a lot. And so I think having those conversations, something like sound thinking, Jean's here, I'll shout out all the people. So that teaches girls in high school about careers in audio engineering and recording. And that's something where the industry can plug in. So many folks come to me who want to help, and it's like, oh, do you want to speak? Do you want to have interns? And that's a way that it connects CUNY, where the program is run out at the public school system, the public college system, to companies, and it creates this kind of pipeline of more diverse folks. So, I think there are those opportunities to do all those things, and I think it's also just I can't stress enough, if you really want to see the city change, is you kind of have to get a little in the weeds about what the city can and can't do. So something I'm always fascinated about is that there are those requirements actually for most developments, and nobody knows what happens. They have to have a public use part of the building, and then literally, I have no fucking clue what those spaces are, if they're sitting vacant, or if they're complying at all, and nobody regulates that. So that'd be a cool thing. I will deny it, even though I like being taped. Someone from an organization said, hey, Department of Buildings, where's this roster of spaces that they're supposed to get for community use?
That's normal. So there's loads of communities have a 1% for culture ordinance. There's about 600 communities in the U.S. that do this. About 400 of them have no idea where the money goes because no one ever accounts for it, and it just ends up in the capital funds, and it doesn't end up for culture. And I've had to do FOIA requests to communities, which piss everybody off, to try to identify where's this money going. And we've been able to, about 20 places now, identify where the money is going and then redirect it back to where it originally is supposed to go. That's one of the things is there are lots of, London's the same. There's lots of things that already exist that aren't being implemented or being, so, yes?
That is an incredible thing to learn that we did hear from you. I know that you want to open into questions. I do just want to say one thing that I think the music or comments that the music business needs to do better. And I think, music business doesn't understand government. Government doesn't often understand a lot of the nuances of the music business, but we're also not very good at explaining how much stuff we do. I think that people think about nightlife, they think about venues a lot because live music rules, but also because they're out there.
Because you can see it.
You can see it. You can't see all the people doing royalties every quarter. And those people work so hard, and there's so many of them. And so many of them who live here. The invisible, unsexy jobs are so much more than the door person and the sound person and all the jobs that people in the public interact with. And I think that's part of the kind of economic job creation benefit that we're not very good at publicizing. It's not just a label guy who's gonna exploit a teenager by taking all of their rights for the rest of their life. That's not the only employee. Sometimes there are those, but there's other ones too.
So, on that note, and the most positive reflection of our industry to end the app. But does anyone have any comments, questions, thoughts? No one? Questions. Please, it always takes.
Yeah, what about not using
Yeah, I mean,
You repeat the question.
yeah, so well, I entered two things, public-private partnerships and then kind of the use of underutilized space. And so, again, it's not sexy and it's annoying to talk to me, I'm sure, because I'm always like, well, sorry, but there's like this regulatory or insurance hurdle. Right. That's like a really big issue. So when I worked for an elected official years ago, and there was all these closed stores, we were going to try to activate empty storefronts with art. And it was like trying to understand who owned each building was bananas. It's like you could not figure it out. And so there's some old woman, Anita Durst, who does this, but like they own half of the real estate in New York City. So I think it's pretty much what she's doing now. It's private building. I can't be sure. But yeah, like, there are those partnerships. The Berkeley deal came together of the city putting in money with a private individual, like a high net worth individual, and a nonprofit university. And so that was a model that we were able to do. For Music Month, over the years of doing it, I've given out over $1 million in like micro grants, So in that models versus independent rubric, I'm not giving money to companies who want to do that. I'm looking at people who are independent, who are doing interesting things, and giving them micro grants to try to give them a platform. So in that way, I'm able to do that. It's just the city cannot receive funds. It's really challenging. There's no way. But Eric Berman here from Universal said, sure, I want to write you a check to underwrite all your work. I wouldn't have a way to take it. I'd have to find
a way.
I mean, I'm fine.
I never have this conversation.
But so I think there are room for public-private partnerships. I don't know that they're the answer to leveling the playing field because you have to be kind of sophisticated to understand how to do that. It's not easy, and even just like one of my cool projects in Music Month in 2018 or 19 was we did this podcast called City FM, and it was like a 13-part series by a woman I met, a woman-owned company on different facets of New York's nightlife, and I was able to get money to do it. And like honestly, we almost bankrupted her because she had to go through so much paperwork that was just impossible for her to fill out, and it took so long, and I felt like horrible. And I'm like, okay, this city says we want to work with minority women-owned businesses, but when we're working with an independent single-person company trying to do that, well, it's not an accessible thing. So I think there's room to do that. I just want to be realistic that it can be very challenging if you don't have lawyers and
Yeah, when it's fun. When I was working in the mayor's office in London, we were setting up what is the Night Czar position there, which is what you guys have area was. And I still remember, like I was one of the staff there referred to me as Buzz Killington because every time I wanted to do something, there was a reason why I couldn't do it. Because London is 33 cities, each with its own policies. It's very hard to get anything done because you have to go to each of them and convince them, and now my friends call me that sometimes because I like to go to bed at 10. But it's you have to understand, like I've learned this, a lot of the barriers were put in place for completely different reasons. And to understand the barriers, often you can find ways around them or find ways to.
Yeah. And sometimes and I mentioned this before, I feel like the city can do a lot of work in kind of connecting like-minded organizations. You mentioned museums and music, and the new museum used to have a concert series. They brought out over the weirdest, best artists, and it was literally just because a guy who worked at the museum also liked cool music. And it was wild to me that this, huge institution had this room that they could have shows in, but it was just this kind of, serendipitous thing that happened. And it is if we weren't reliant on those types of things, individuals having to kind of have that idea and go for it instead of saying, how could we make this happen? Who could we connect you to? How could we connect all these different, stakeholders into potentially creating something? And obviously there's festivals, there's concerts, there's free concerts, which is already doing that. So it's just kind of another type of that type of connection.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I'd just encourage people because we all have 4 things we say in our career. Mine is my best ideas come from other people. And so I think it's really not, there can be a weird power differential, I think, for some folks to approach government, but like, we don't know very much. I know like a lot of inane bureaucratic things and how to make things happen. But, Jean and I were put together. I had a vision for a program for young girls about careers across the creative sectors. And Jean had a really more refined model for just music. And it was like, oh, and that's how that happened because, I had an idea and she had a solution. And same thing, Justin's idea about music. Like, I wouldn't have come up with that idea, but by partnering with him, we were able to bring in all these other folks. So the 60 events, I didn't come up with any of those. People came to me and pitched me an idea, and then I worked with them to refine it, to make it appropriate. And so I think like it's really not assuming that people, I think sometimes folks assume that there's like a malice on the part of government. Usually it's just like incompetence or cluelessness. It's just like, if it's not on your radar, you can't address it. And so kind of coming at it with the benefit of the doubt, like, okay, maybe if someone knew about this, we could find a solution together.
Yeah. Please, in the back.
I'd like to talk a little bit about documentation. And, I started a little website in '97 called Punkcast. I used to send somebody down to CBGB every Sunday. We shoot it. We used to put some of it up on the web. And around 2000, I started doing it myself. And I shot bands like the Aliens and all. And I did it for like 10 years. I shot like thousands of shows. But I never got paid for it. I had alternative income. There is no way to make money out of that. I mean, eventually, meeting in the bathroom pays me like $3,000 for the footage. But and the people who shot in the 70s, they're being the Fails Library is taking their stuff now. It's only, you've got to wait 30 or 40 years before anybody's going to like show interest in what stuff. So I'm just saying that it's something that you haven't discussed, is supporting the documentation of the scene as it's going on.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, the real complexity there is all rights issues.
Well, the way I've worked is I've never asked for rights from anybody.
Yeah, that's the problem.
You retain your rights. So when Meet Me in the Bathroom used the footage, they had to go to the bands.
Yes, of course, yeah. But whenever anything's on YouTube or on a private website or any of that stuff, there are, and anything that's live streamed or it's, on and not an unofficial platform that doesn't have deals with all major music companies, there is a lot of complexity there. But and I think that music companies are getting better at that, and there is a lot more hunger for documentation of the live experience. But I mean, part of the issue is like, there are so many people involved who want their pennies.
Yeah, if you don't record, then it's
No.
Okay.
This is in my opinion, this is never going to go away. Is a somewhat outdated dilemma at this point because everything is so documented. Now we're dealing with the opposite.
Right.
That's over documentation. You have too many Instagram reels and all of these things that are going on that are over documented. I think what you've done that's so special is you've been able to capture a moment in time at a point where it wasn't being captured by 1,000 people, which makes what you're doing more valuable, right? And that's the thing. Is like before it was team trading. Right, or if it wasn't team trading, it was look at the old art house. Like I would go to the visit the museum of the Radio Television Museum, and it's like you go. We still haven't seen any TV show that was ever on. I would go with people and look up relatives that were at shows like the 40s that we never saw. Right, so it's like this idea of content is always available is a recent idea to us. Right, you had to be able to dig or know somebody where. I have book office, read dark web, the magazine, whatever it is that you could do, you would get this information. So kudos to you for documenting it. But I would also say, if those videos became nothing, people would not care that you did it. So the fact that some of it actually gave something makes it even more valuable, right? Like so, it's like it's what changed it from a passion or a hobby to an investment with rights ownership and all the other stuff.
Yeah. So, I'm just conscious of time. And I saw one more hand for a quick question. Okay, yep, you in the back, and then we'll close out. And
At EDC and the real estate team, so a lot of what you've been saying really speaks to me. And just to reiterate a lot what you've said, Anna, just like really honing in and making clear to folks higher up that will make decisions that will trickle down to people like me at EDC is that the economic impact of music is real. Because for us at EDC, we're basically always looking at which are the incentives, what are the things we're focusing on. And for example, music would be competing with offshore wind or something like that. These are the things we're focusing on, making transactions. And so just like as, my perspective as an EDC employee, but also as a lover of music, it's just how do we keep pushing and making people aware that there is an economic impact beyond just like venues, but, folks that work in rights and, all of the larger just landscape that music is. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for coming. I think the book could be helpful. No, obviously the bar will remain open. No one is being kicked out, but I just want to thank you to my three amazing friends and panelists for joining me. And thank you to all of you for taking the time. This obviously means the world to me that people come want to hear about the book and hear about these kind of topics. So if you haven't picked up a copy, please do. It would be graciously appreciated. They're heavy. And have a wonderful rest of your night. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay.